This is the Garden of English. I'm Tim Freitas, and today we're going to talk about writing strong intro paragraphs for a rhetorical analysis paper. Stay tuned. All right, we are going to talk today about writing intro paragraphs for rhetorical analysis essays. And quite frankly, a rhetorical analysis intro paragraph is going to be different than any other type of essay that you write. In fact, if you want to know how to write an intro paragraph for any other type of essay, whether you're in high school or college or anything like that, you're going to want to check out the video that's linked right up here. But the rhetorical analysis is a little bit different when you're writing a full rhetorical analysis essay. So I'm going to switch over here to my steps for writing a rhetorical analysis essay. And so we have our steps that are up here. Before I get into the process of writing a rhetorical analysis intro paragraph, I want to just point out that when it comes to AP exams or timed writing settings, I actually encourage my students to let their thesis statement function as their full intro paragraph. And the reason why is because oftentimes when you don't have time to fully develop an essay and fully process an essay and bring it through multiple drafts in a time setting. And so because of that, I tell my kids, just get right into things. Your thesis can work as your intro. It's not a problem at all. Now, on an AP exam day, I also do tell my kids to skip 3 or 4 lines before they write their thesis. So if they've got a little extra time, they can go back and think about writing intro paragraphs for their papers. But in the grand scheme of things, the intro paragraph is, creating the full intro paragraph is not necessarily that important in a timed writing setting. However, what I'm going to show you here today can work on a timed writing setting if your teacher insists on having a full intro paragraph in even a timed writing setting. But really what I make my kids do this process for is when I have them write a rhetorical analysis that is going to be a processed paper. That means we're going to go through multiple drafts. I expect them to have a full intro paragraph. I expect them to have more than 3 body paragraphs. We're talking about writing, a 3 or 4 page paper and having a full conclusion. So once again, right, if you want to talk about timed writings and how intro paragraphs should look, you're going to want to actually check out the videos that are up here. But if you want to actually say, how do I write a rhetorical analysis, full intro paragraph for a process paper, or for my teacher who might actually say, hey, I want a full intro paragraph, even though you can get away with just doing a thesis, then you're going to want to go through this step. Through these steps, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use George W. Bush's post 9/11 speech as my example here in this video. And the reason why is because I've got some rhetorical analysis videos that use this as an example. So we're going to just use a thesis from that, okay? So if I were actually having my kids write a timed writing thesis for the rhetorical analysis of George W. Bush's post 9/11 speech, you're going to notice that their thesis would look something like this. It says, in his post 9/11 speech, an address that recounts the state of the nation after the deadly terrorist attacks, former President George W. Bush varies his pronoun usage, subtly shifts his tone, and repeats patriotic metaphors in order to highlight that although all are experiencing tragic grief, the country is and will remain strong, ultimately moving the divided American public to unite and prepare for retaliatory action. So you're going to notice that this is actually a really effective thesis for a time setting because it's going to outline your whole paper. You're going to talk about his varied pronoun usage. You're going to talk about how he subtly shifts in tone. And you're going to talk about how he repeats patriotic metaphors. And you'll probably talk about them in that order. And if I'm in a high-stress situation, it's nice to have that kind of like laid out for me because then I'm like, oh yeah, here's the first movement of my paper, most likely my first body paragraph. Here's my second movement of my paper, most likely my second body paragraph. And here's my third movement, most likely my third body paragraph. And we're going to connect that to either the grief or the idea that the country's still strong or uniting around this sense of justice. So it's a strong thesis for our timed writing. But if we're going to write a process paper, we don't want to list out rhetorical choices if we're writing a rhetorical analysis essay that's a process paper, okay? And the reason why is because if you just list out 3 choices, that really means like you're kind of going to write 3 body paragraphs. And if you have to write a 3 to 4 page paper or a rhetorical analysis, 3 body paragraphs is probably not going to cut it. So we want to actually try to open up this thesis statement and not close it off to just only being able to write about these things. So we're going to try to shift this around a little bit and turn it into a really strong intro paragraph. So what do we do? Well, I've got steps here for the intro paragraph, and what happens here is these steps actually are derived from thinking about parts of the rhetorical situation. Now, one thing I'd like to point out is that the typical intro paragraph that I encourage, that is like the most versatile intro paragraph ever. Once again, there's a video for that up here. But that intro paragraph for most other papers is going to go through 3 moves from the classical argument structure, and they are called the web, the background, and the partition. You can check that out in the video that I referenced. We are not, when we talk about a rhetorical analysis, because it's a little bit different, we're working with somebody else's writing, we are going to skip the web part of the intro paragraph because we want to get right into what's going to help our analysis actually work itself out. And so what we're going to do is we're going to think about step 1. And step 1 for writing a strong rhetorical analysis intro paragraph is going to be providing a 2 to 3 sentence summary of the socio-historical context of the time period from where that piece was produced. So we might have to do a little bit of research, but we need to say, okay, what was going on socially and historically right around that time when the piece that we're analyzing was actually introduced. And so if we think about the post 9/11 speech, we want to realize that we're moving right out of the late 1990s into the early 2000s, and we want to take that kind of sociocultural history, and we're going to summarize that in 2 to 3 sentences. And I want you to just look at my example here because you'll notice that step 1, we've highlighted it in yellow here. This is where it begins in my intro paragraph. And we're going to remember that context is like the bigger grand scheme of things. What's going on surrounding the speech, not the exigence, not what's prompting our speaker to speak. This is kind of what's going on socioculturally, what's going on in history. So notice what I did here as I did step 1, and I've labeled that for you, and I've highlighted it yellow right down here. It says the late 1990s and early 2000s were some of the most peaceful times in U.S. history. The economy was strong, the budget was almost balanced, and America was indeed recognized as the world's greatest nation. The country wasn't perfect, however, because there were deep-seated political divides within the population, as exemplified by an incredibly contentious election in 2000, where the candidate who won didn't even receive majority of the popular vote. And I actually have a typo there. We're going to fix that on screen here. Didn't receive the majority of the popular vote. Well, now what I've done here is I have talked about the socio-historical context. This right here is not what prompted George W. Bush to speak, but here's kind of the background. And this helps paint the picture of where we get to when we move to step 2. So step 2 for a rhetorical analysis intro paragraph is to begin shifting to, okay, what's going on kind of socio-historically, and let's start shifting to the actual exigence for the piece that you were looking at. And so this is going to be done in pink in my example. So we started with that socio-historical context, and now we move to step number 2. So we have right here, it says, amidst this mostly docile time in history. So notice that I'm now shifting, right? It says one Tuesday morning, unsuspecting individuals boarded 4 planes that would never make safe landings. In fact, 2 of the 4 would never touch the ground again in one piece. Mid-flight, each one of these 4 planes were hijacked by Islamic radicals seeking to destroy not only iconic landmarks close to the heart of the U.S. or just the lives of individuals and families, but also the American spirit. September 11th was the first time since Pearl Harbor that war was brought to the shores of America, and it was a dark day for all who remember it. America, shocked and distraught, needed to find hope and comfort in this dark time, and they did so in looking to their leader, President George W. Bush. And notice what actually happens here in this second part. I have shifted from, hey, this time of peace where there were some political tensions, and then I moved right into describing the actual exigence for the speech that was made, and that was the 9/11 attacks. Okay, so what we've done here is we've taken step 1, socio-historical context in a nice broad sense. Step 2, we really focused in on the exigence. And now step 3, we're going to actually add our thesis to the end. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to copy it just like we have right here at the top. What we're going to do is we're going to take the rhetorical choices out of the thesis. We're going to leave it a lot wider, a lot more broad or open, okay? And we're going to focus on the purpose. What we're also going to do is we're going to try to really transition from this idea of they're looking to the leader. Now, what is the leader actually doing throughout this speech? And the reason why we're not going to list our choices in our thesis and we're just going to leave the purpose there is because we want to have the ability to write about as many choices as we want in our essay. If we just limit it to 3, we're kind of limited to 3 moves, and that's going to get us maybe 2 to 2.5 pages. If we have to write a 4 to 5 page rhetorical analysis, we want to be able to write about as many choices as we can. And just by having the purpose there, when we say, here's George W. Bush's purpose, we can then talk about any move we want in the paper from there on out that helps to achieve that purpose. So let's actually see how I added my thesis here. One of the things that I want to point out real quick, though, is that when you add your thesis, you don't want to just, boom, plop it in. You want to actually try to transition into your thesis so that you can really let it flow and that it makes perfect sense to tag it on right at the end there. So we had our historical context in our yellow. We had our exigence in our pink. And now let's look at how I tack my thesis right on here. It says, on the evening of this attack, George W. Bush delivered what is now famously known as his post-9/11 speech, an address that recounts the state of the nation after the deadly terrorist attacks, where he reminded the country that although all were experiencing tragic grief, the country was and would remain strong, ultimately moving the divided American public to unite and prepare for retaliatory action. And there you have it. I have created the whole purpose for the piece. What should the audience or the American public understand? Although all were experiencing tragic grief, the country was and would remain strong. They need to understand that. And if they understood that, what would they do? They would be moved to unite and prepare for retaliatory action. So the purpose is right here. So now I can write this full rhetorical analysis. Each body paragraph, I can choose whatever choice I want that helps to actually build to that purpose, and I'm not limited to just the ones that I listed out in my thesis. This is a nice, sophisticated intro paragraph. It shows a understanding of a broad context, and that's why this would actually work out. This could work out well on an AP exam, but when I think about having that time pressure and that time setting, this thesis is also excellent, and this actually helps really guide your essay in that high-pressure situation so you don't forget what you want to do. But it's your choice. Both of these work. You can, in a timed essay, you can just write your thesis and that's good enough, or you can actually try to write a really strong intro paragraph like this that begins to really contextualize what's going on, and that can really help with sophistication if that's what you're going for. So these are choices that you have to make. But once again, this video in particular is meant for if you're writing a process rhetorical analysis paper, how should you produce an intro paragraph? I'd like to just point out in this document, which is in the description down below, by the way, there is a link to that. You'll also notice that I do have my conclusions, steps for writing conclusions for rhetorical analysis essays. I already made a video about that. I do have an example with the post-9/11 speech, though. So I do want to just point out that that is indeed here for you down there as well. So we're going to actually go back to full screen here, and now that we are, I would just like to say if this video is helpful for you at all, I want to ask that you support the Garden of English in the easiest way possible. You just click the word like down, or you click the thumbs up down at the bottom, and then you click subscribe. That helps us out here, right? You can help the Garden of English out in many other ways. You can, first of all, check out our new website, thegardenofenglish.com. If you haven't checked that out, please make sure that you do so. Notice that we do offer services besides actually just making videos. There are a lot of free resources on there, but if you actually want personalized services, we offer some tutoring, we offer some academic coaching for teachers and professional development, and we also have a really good artist that works with us too that I'd love to get you in contact with. You can like us on Facebook, you can follow us on Facebook, you can also follow us on Instagram, and of course if you want to do none of those things, that's fine too, because these videos are free. I hope you enjoyed them, and I hope that you stay tuned and actually check out the other video that I'm doing on intro paragraphs for all the types of essays that are not rhetorical analysis. And well, hopefully I'll see you there. Have a great one.